Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the relationship between the U.S. and the International Criminal Court.
All right.
And we've got some pretty fascinating sources here. We've got excerpts from a lecture from the ICC President himself.
Oh,
We've got some academic papers.
okay.
We've got some news articles.
Interesting.
And we've even got a peek into some internal U.S. government documents.
Fascinating. It's sure to be a very nuanced relationship that we're going to be exploring here.
Yeah, I'm hoping that today we can kind of explore this relationship and hopefully uncover some surprising facts and perspectives about it.
No, I think will.
To get started, I think it would be useful to just kind of lay out the current state of affairs between the U.S. and the ICC.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think the ICC President, Chili Ibo Isuji, really kind of sums it up
Okay.
when he calls the relationship unfortunate.
Right.
And he says it kind of masks a highly troubling reality. And to kind of emphasize that reality, he even compares John Bolton's 2018 threats against the ICC to warnings issued to terrorist organizations.
Wow.
Pretty strong words there.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it in the historical context as well, because someone like Alexander Hamilton, right? He saw the judiciary as the least dangerous branch of government.
Yeah.
He famously said it has neither force nor will, but merely judgment.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic, given that the ICC was designed to,
Right.
counter impunity for
Yeah.
genocide, war crimes,
Right.
and crimes against humanity.
Yeah.
Crimes that the U.S. has historically played a major role in addressing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of irony, I think the situation in Afghanistan really highlights this tension between the U.S. and the ICC.
Okay.
The ICC prosecutor wanted to investigate alleged war crimes, crimes against humanity there,
Okay.
including some that could have involved U.S. forces. And, it's important to remember
Yeah.
that the ICC operates under this principle of complementarity,
Right.
meaning that it only steps in when national systems
Yeah.
fail to hold perpetrators accountable. So
I see. So it's not about replacing national justice systems.
That we're
It's
doing.
about filling the gaps where they exist.
exactly.
Okay.
And I think another important thing to remember is that, the prosecutor wasn't just focusing on potential excesses by U.S. forces.
Right. Right.
This investigation also encompassed Taliban atrocities,
Mhm.
including things like beheadings
Yeah,
and suicide bombing.
that's right.
But the U.S. reaction, it was swift. It was fierce.
Okay.
They revoked the prosecutor's visa.
Wow.
They threatened sanctions. And there was a lot of condemnation from groups like the American Bar Association.
Yeah, which played a key role, right, in establishing the ICC in the first place.
Exactly.
It's interesting how this really kind of reveals a deep concern within the U.S. government, this concern about its actions being scrutinized under international law.
Right, and that concern becomes even more apparent when we look at the U.S.'s use of Article 98 agreements.
Article 98, remind
So
me.
Article 98 agreements are these bilateral agreements that the U.S. would pursue
Okay.
to try and prevent the transfer of American nationals to the ICC.
So they were trying to kind of shield U.S. personnel
Yeah, shield them from the court's jurisdiction.
from the court.
Right,
Like-
and these agreements,
It must have been pretty controversial.
they drew a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
Because many argued that
Yeah.
it undermined the ICC's effectiveness.
Right.
And it set this dangerous precedent for other countries to kind of opt out of
Yeah.
international legal obligations.
Just kind of pick and choose, right, what they want to abide by.
Exactly. And the
Yeah.
EU is a really great example of this. They were, they really struggled to try and
Right.
balance their support for the ICC
Yeah.
with maintaining good relations with the U.S.
Right, because they support the ICC, but they also want to stay on good terms with the U.S.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it really highlights this complex web of
Right.
political considerations that get all tied up
Mm-hmm.
in international justice. So
Yeah.
we have this, this historical backdrop of the U.S. championing international justice. But then we also see this present-day reality of them being very wary of the ICC, even going to great lengths to limit its reach when it comes to its own citizens.
Yeah. And that really raises a key question, doesn't it? How can the U.S., with its legacy of advocating for accountability, reconcile its concerns about sovereignty
Right.
with this commitment to upholding international justice.
Yeah. And that question, I think, becomes even more pressing
Okay.
when we look at the ICC's recent move
Okay.
regarding Israeli leaders.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah. So let's talk about those arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant.
All right.
It seems like, the U.S. stance on the ICC really kind of
It shifts
dramatically depending on who's in the hot seat.
depending on who they're going after.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the ICC issued these arrest warrants for Israeli leaders alleging war crimes and crimes against humanity, all related to the Gaza Strip.
Oh, wow.
And the U.S. condemned these warrants very strongly.
Okay.
But this is in stark contrast to the U.S.'s previous support for the ICC's actions against individuals like Putin.
Interesting.
So it really raises these questions about consistency
Right.
and about motivations behind the U.S. approach to the ICC.
Yeah, yeah.
It does seem like they're kind of picking and choosing which actions to support based on,
It seems that way, yeah.
their own political alliances.
It definitely creates a dilemma for countries who support both, right? The ICC and Israel.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a tough position to be in.
And some nations have even confirmed that they would enforce the warrants.
Wow.
So, it just demonstrates
Yeah.
the far-reaching consequences of the ICC's actions.
That's right.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've kind of established this current tension between the U.S. and the ICC.
Right.
And we've highlighted, I think, some key examples of that tension.
Yeah, I think to really get a grasp of it, though, we need to dig deeper into the arguments for and against U.S. engagement
Oh, I like it.
with the ICC.
So that sounds like a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
So yeah, let's unpack some of these arguments for and against the U.S. engaging with the ICC.
Yeah.
We've got sources here that are vehemently opposed to the U.S. supporting the court at all, and they cite concerns about, potential violations of the Constitution, surrendering national sovereignty.
Right.
They argue that allowing an international body to potentially prosecute American citizens,
Yeah.
it undermines the U.S. Constitution and its judicial system.
Okay, so what about the counter-arguments?
Yeah.
What are the sources saying in favor of the U.S. being involved with the ICC?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Proponents of the U.S. being involved, they argue that the ICC plays a really vital role in upholding global justice, making sure that people are held accountable for the most serious crimes. And they emphasize that, the ICC's mandate to prosecute genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, these are universal concerns. They transcend national borders.
Right. So it sounds like they're saying that the U.S. has like a moral obligation to support these international justice efforts.
Precisely. And they argue, the U.S. is a global leader, right? Champion of human rights.
Right.
It should be at the forefront of efforts to, end impunity and promote accountability. They even go so far as to say that actively engaging with the ICC could actually benefit U.S. foreign policy.
Okay, how so?
Well, they say, it strengthens the U.S.'s moral standing in the world, encourages other countries to uphold international law.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But how do they address, these concerns about national sovereignty and potential bias against the U.S.?
Right. Well, it's a really crucial point, and some sources, they argue that the ICC structure itself, it includes these checks and balances to ensure fairness and impartiality.
Okay.
So they say that kind of mitigates the risk of politically motivated prosecutions.
Right.
They also highlight that the ICC is a court of last resort. It only steps in, when national systems fail to address these very grave crimes.
Okay.
So they think that, a robust U.S. judicial system, coupled with, the commitment to the rule of law, should really alleviate concerns about potential abuses by the ICC.
Okay, so we've got these, opposing viewpoints.
Yeah.
One emphasizing the risks, and the other emphasizing, the potential benefits and the moral imperative.
Right.
How do these different perspectives then play out in the context of these Netanyahu and Gallant arrest warrants?
Well, I think that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. The U.S. condemnation of the warrants against the Israeli leaders, particularly, given their support for the ICC's actions against Putin, really exposes a potential inconsistency
Yeah.
in their approach to international justice.
It definitely seems like the U.S. is picking and choosing which ICC actions they support
Yeah.
based on, their own political alliances. It's not really
Right.
a profiling courage when it comes to standing up for these principles of international law.
No, it's a valid observation. It really does raise questions about the credibility of the U.S. commitment to this rules-based international order, right?
Yeah.
If it looks like they're applying those rules selectively,
Right.
it feeds into this perception that the U.S. is more concerned with protecting its allies. Even when those allies are accused of, serious crimes, than it is with actually upholding these universal principles of justice.
And that perception, I imagine, has, serious implications for ICC and its legitimacy and effectiveness.
That's right. This perception of double standards, it can really undermine confidence in the ICC, right? Discourage cooperation from countries who might see the court as, a tool of Western powers rather than an independent arbiter of justice.
Right, yeah.
So,
So on the one hand, we've got the U.S. advocating for accountability and the rule of law, but on the other hand, actively trying to shield itself and its allies from the ICC's reach.
It's a tough balancing act that they're struggling to navigate. It raises the question of whether the U.S. can effectively promote a rules-based international order while seeking exemptions for itself and its allies from those rules.
Okay, so we've explored the historical context. We've unpacked, these arguments for and against U.S. engagement with the ICC.
Yeah.
We've looked at how these tensions play out in these real-world situations.
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to this idea of, the U.S. playing a key role in establishing the Nuremberg Tribunal after World War II, setting this precedent for holding individuals accountable for war crimes.
That is a crucial point. And the legacy of Nuremberg looms large, in these discussions. It's cited by both supporters and critics of the court. Supporters see it as a continuation,
Yeah.
A further step towards a world where those who commit these heinous crimes are held accountable regardless of nationality, political affiliations.
And the critics, how do they view it?
Well, critics, they often point to the differences between Nuremberg and the ICC.
Okay.
They argue that Nuremberg was, this unique event conducted in the aftermath of this devastating war. And that the victors had a clear mandate, to prosecute the defeated. So they, they express concern that the ICC, unlike Nuremberg, lacks that same level of legitimacy and could be used as, a tool of political maneuvering or to target certain countries unfairly.
So for them, the ICC kind of represents an overreach of international law, a threat to national sovereignty.
Yes, exactly. Some critics see it as this, this dangerous erosion of national sovereignty, giving, unelected international bureaucrats the power to potentially prosecute citizens of sovereign states.
It's almost like they see the ICC as, this slippery slope towards global governance.
That's one way to put it. Yeah, some critics definitely see it as, as part of a broader trend towards global governance, which they see as a threat, The national sovereignty, democratic accountability. They fear that, the ICC could become this tool for powerful states to impose their will on weaker nations. Or that it could even be used to stifle dissent or persecute political opponents.
It seems like this debate about the ICC really taps into some really deep anxieties about, the U.S.'s role in the world. Its relationship with these international institutions and its commitment to international law.
Absolutely. And the U.S. has always had, this complex relationship with international law. Often it's a strong advocate for a rules-based international order, but it's also fiercely protective of its sovereignty and reluctant to cede any authority to these international bodies.
And the ICC, with its mandate to prosecute individuals for these most serious crimes, regardless of their nationality, their political status, it represents this direct challenge, I think.
It does,
to the traditional view of sovereignty.
It forces the U.S. to confront some fundamental questions about its role in the world, its commitment to international justice.
Okay, so we've delved into, the different perspectives on the ICC, the historical and political context. But what about the court's actual track record? How effective has it been in actually achieving its goals?
That's a key question, and one that I think we need to explore in the
Okay.
next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds like we've got a lot more to uncover.
Yeah.
All right, so let's dig into that track record. How effective has the ICC actually been in achieving its goals? I mean, some of our sources paint kind of a grim picture.
Yeah.
They point to the court's limited resources and the challenges in actually enforcing its decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. The ICC doesn't have, like, a global police force, right? It relies on cooperation from states to arrest suspects, enforce sentences. And that reliance can create a significant hurdle, especially when you're dealing with, powerful nations or individuals who have the backing of powerful allies.
Right, and that brings to mind, those Article 98 agreements that we talked about earlier.
Right, exactly.
Where the U.S. was actively seeking these agreements to shield
American nationals,
right,
from ICC jurisdiction.
And those agreements really sparked a lot of debate.
Oh, yeah.
Critics argued that they undermined this whole principle of equality before the law.
Yeah, they created this two-tiered system.
Exactly, where some are shielded.
Right, where some are shielded from accountability.
Just because of their nationality.
Simply because of where they're from.
Right, and it creates this perception of impunity, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Like the rules don't apply equally to everyone.
Exactly, and that perception, as we've said, can really erode the legitimacy of the ICC.
So it's not just about, punishing past crimes, right?
Right.
It's also about deterring future atrocity. And if potential perpetrators think that they can just kind of escape justice.
Right, through political maneuvering.
Right, through these backroom deals.
Yeah, then the deterrent effect is significantly diminished.
So the ICC's effectiveness really hinges on its
its
ability to, show that no one is above the law.
Right, regardless of their position, connections.
Right, but the reality is that the court faces some pretty big obstacles in achieving that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, the U.S. condemnation of those arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, while supporting the ICC's action against Putin, that really highlights those obstacles.
It does.
It raises questions about consistency, about impartiality in the U.S.'s approach to international justice.
And that double standard just further complicates the ICC's efforts to gain global legitimacy and support.
Okay, so we've got the ICC navigating this complex web of political realities and national interests, trying to uphold these principles of justice while also grappling with these limitations.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
But, despite the obstacles, the ICC has achieved some pretty notable successes.
Okay.
They've brought to trial warlords, former heads of state, high-ranking military officials.
Right.
They've shed light on these horrific crimes.
Yeah.
Provided a platform for victims.
And that platform for victims, I mean, that's incredibly important, right?
Oh, it is, yeah.
It's a reminder that these aren't just abstract legal debates.
It has real human consequences.
Right. These debates have real human consequences.
The ICC, for all its limitations, I think it offers a glimmer of hope for those victims who have nowhere else to turn.
Right.
It represents a commitment, at least in principle, to the idea that those who commit atrocities will be held accountable.
And that commitment, even if it's not, always perfectly realized, is so crucial for building, a more just and peaceful world.
It's a long and often arduous journey.
Yeah.
But the pursuit of international justice is a worthy endeavor.
Well, this deep dive has certainly been eye-opening for me. It's given us a lot to think about, particularly, I think, regarding the, complexities of international justice.
Right.
The challenges of holding these powerful actors accountable.
Yeah, and what's important to remember is that these aren't just abstract legal debates. They have real-world implications, for victims of atrocities and for the future of global accountability.
And as we've seen, the relationship between the U.S. and the ICC, it's really at the heart of a lot of these debates. And the U.S., with its historical role in shaping, international norms and institutions, it has this unique responsibility, I think, to engage with these issues.
It's a responsibility that requires careful consideration,
Yeah.
of both the potential benefits and risks of engaging with the ICC. It requires a commitment to upholding the principles of justice and accountability. While also safeguarding national interests and protecting individual rights.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think first and foremost, stay informed, stay engaged with these issues. The ICC and the broader field of international justice, I mean, this is constantly evolving, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to understand the nuances, the complexities involved.
You can't just rely on, sound bites or these simplistic narratives. We have to dig deeper,
Right.
seek out diverse perspectives and really critically evaluate, the arguments that are presented to us.
And then armed with that knowledge and understanding, I think we can participate in the conversation, raise awareness, hold our leaders accountable.
Because ultimately, the pursuit of international justice, I mean, this is a collective endeavor, right?
Right.
It requires the participation of individuals, civil society organizations, governments.
Yeah, around the world.
It's about demanding accountability for those who commit these most serious crimes.
Yeah.
Supporting the victims.
Right.
Working towards a world where justice and the rule of law, prevail.
Right.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
But hopefully it's left you with, a deeper understanding of this complex world of international justice.
And hopefully it's sparked a desire to learn more, to engage more deeply, and to contribute to the ongoing efforts to build a more just and peaceful world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.